The trial that broke civilizations. The moment the enormous doors slid open, a hush fell over the vast observation chamber. The gathered alien dignitaries, scientists, and military strategists leaned forward in anticipation. The Galactic Trials were about to begin, and every species present knew what was coming. For centuries, these trials had been the ultimate test, a brutal, unforgiving gauntlet designed to expose the weaknesses of any species daring to call itself strong. Thousands of civilizations had stepped into this arena before. None had conquered it. None had ever left unscathed. Some had barely lasted a few minutes before crumbling under the weight of fear. Others had fought bravely, but ultimately succumbed to the impossible challenges laid before them. This was the great equalizer, a test no civilization could claim mastery over. Until today. As two figures stepped into the chamber, the collective gasp from the audience was almost deafening. They were human. Dr. Virex, the lead xenopsychologist overseeing the trials, felt a creeping sense of unease. He had studied this species extensively, poring over every piece of intelligence gathered from the fringes of galactic space. Humans were relatively new to the interstellar stage, yet stories about their impossible adaptability, reckless courage, and alarming disregard for their own mortality had already spread like wildfire. Now he was about to witness the truth firsthand. The first human, Commander Doran Vex, strolled forward like a man inspecting a new restaurant. His dark flight suit bore the scuffs of heavy use, the patches on his arms marking his affiliation with some Terran military unit. His gait was casual, almost lazy, but there was something in the way he moved, a quiet confidence, a readiness, like a predator who knew he was at the top of the food chain. Beside him, Specialist Tullia Rains was a stark contrast. Her expression was unreadable, eyes scanning the chamber with the precise efficiency of a soldier calculating every possible threat. Her posture was controlled, movements fluid, as if she had already adapted to the unknown variables ahead. They weren't afraid. Dr. Virex's mandibles clicked together sharply. No species had ever entered the trials looking so amused. Vex grinned as he took in the chamber's design. Thought it'd be bigger. A ripple of confusion spread through the observation deck. The chamber was immense, designed to dwarf its participants and make them feel insignificant. It was engineered to intimidate, to crush confidence before the trial even began. But these humans, they were unimpressed. Talia exhaled softly. Focus, Vex. No need to flex in front of the aliens. Vex smirked but said nothing. His green eyes flickered with an unsettling eagerness. Dr. Virex cleared his throat, his voice amplified through the chamber's intercom. Representatives of humanity, you are the first of your kind to undergo the Galactic Trials. This is not a game. It is a scientifically rigorous evaluation designed to measure the limits of survival, adaptability, and endurance. Vex tilted his head. Sounds like a Tuesday on Earth. The audience murmured in confusion. Virex ignored them. This test has been the undoing of every species that attempted it. You will be pushed to the brink of death. There is no shame in surrendering if you... Yeah. Vex interrupted with a wave of his hand. Let's get on with it. We didn't come all this way for a lecture. Virex felt a flash of irritation. Very well. The first phase begins now. The chamber came to life. Phase 1. The ground falls away. Instantly, the artificial gravity within the chamber fluctuated violently, shifting from normal to 0G in an instant. The ground beneath them fractured, jagged pieces of terrain rising and falling as the entire floor became an unstable death trap. The temperature dropped, a biting cold filling the air as thick fog spilled in from unseen vents, reducing visibility to near zero. This was where most species faltered. The sudden gravity shifts sent bodies tumbling. The unstable ground made movement unpredictable, and the creeping cold sapped strength and clarity with terrifying speed. Most species reacted with panic, their survival instincts betraying them. But the humans, They started laughing. Vex grinned as he felt the gravity fluctuate. "Ooh, this is fun." He adjusted effortlessly, shifting his stance as if he had spent a lifetime dealing with random gravitational forces. Talia, already crouched low to absorb the changes, exhaled through her nose. "Feels like a drop ship in turbulence." She didn't even flinch as the ground beneath her suddenly gave way, leaping effortlessly to a more stable platform, as if she had anticipated it. From the observation deck, a horrified murmur spread among the scientists. "They are adapting in real time," one of the researchers whispered. Virex's exoskeleton paled. "That is not possible." The chamber amplified the instability, increasing the gravity flux to extremes. One moment, it was like walking on the surface of a gas giant, every step a crushing weight. The next, they were in freefall, the ground vanishing beneath them entirely. Vex twisted midair, laughing, using the zero-G moment to adjust his position before gravity slammed him back down. He landed smoothly, rolling with the impact. Talia never stumbled once. The observers watched in stunned silence. "Increase the difficulty," Virex snapped. The chamber responded immediately. The fog thickened into a blinding mist. The gravity shifted into a chaotic pulse, cycling between crushing force and disorienting weightlessness. The terrain fractured even further, leaving only a few narrow footholds. It was madness. But the humans were thriving. Vex vaulted from one crumbling ledge to another with unnatural precision, his body adjusting in perfect sync with the environment. Talia followed, her movement more controlled, precise, like a soldier advancing through an active battlefield. From the observation deck, the head of military analysis tightened his grip on the railing. "By the void. They're getting faster." Virex felt something cold crawl up his spine. No species has ever enjoyed the trials. The humans weren't merely surviving. They were playing. And the worst part, they hadn't even started trying yet. The trial fights back. A tense silence gripped the observation deck. Across the chamber, alien diplomats, military strategists, and scientists watched in growing disbelief as the humans continued their impossible performance. The Galactic Trials had been engineered to break the will of every species that attempted them. The challenges were not meant to be overcome. They were meant to expose weaknesses, to make even the strongest civilizations acknowledge their limits. And yet these two Deathworlders, Commander Doran Vex and Specialist Talia Rains, were treating it like a playground. Dr. Virex's secondary hearts thumped in distress as he watched Vex vault effortlessly across collapsing platforms, adjusting his movements with terrifying precision. Rains followed close behind, calculating her every step with machine-like efficiency. The first phase had already forced entire warrior species to surrender in terror. The gravity shifts, unstable terrain, and creeping cold should have reduced the humans to panicked, stumbling wrecks. Instead, they were adapting. Instead, they were laughing. A military officer beside Virex swallowed hard. "Sir, what do we do?" Virex's mandibles twitched. "We proceed to the next phase." His voice was calmer than he felt. "We have to stop them. Phase 2, the gauntlet awakens." A deep, resonating hum filled the chamber. The artificial environment shifted, reconfiguring itself for the next trial. The temperature plummeted, freezing mist rising from the floor as the oxygen levels thinned further. The terrain began to shift, not just collapsing, but actively fighting against them. The once stable surfaces convulsed, trying to shake the contestants off balance. Then came the final touch. From the shadows of the chamber, drones emerged. Their sleek metallic forms hovered ominously, scanning their targets before unleashing a barrage of plasma bursts. The observers held their breath. The combat phase had begun. The moment the first shot was fired, Vex moved. He dropped into a slide, narrowly dodging a plasma bolt, his body twisting with the same effortless motion as a dancer navigating a familiar routine. Rains was already ahead of him. She didn't even break stride. One of the drones targeted her, She sidestepped at the last possible second, allowing the blast to sear past her shoulder without touching her. Not luck. Calculation. The drones adjusted their targeting, increasing the rate of fire, but the humans were too fast, too unpredictable. From the observation deck, Virex's breath caught in his throat. "They're reading the attack patterns," a scientist muttered in disbelief. "They're predicting the shots." The drones fired again. Vex leaped onto a collapsing platform, using the unstable momentum to propel himself forward. He twisted midair, grabbing the edge of a floating rock just as the plasma burst impacted where he had been a second ago. He swung upward, flipping onto the drone itself. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The audience gasped. Virex froze. Vex smirked, planting his feet on the drone's back as if he were surfing through the battlefield. He let out a whistle. "Nice ride." The drone's AI tried to compensate, shaking violently to throw him off. It failed. Vex leaned into the movement, controlling it as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Then he grabbed onto the drone's chassis and twisted, hard. With a metallic shriek, the drone lost stability, spinning out of control before crashing into another attacker. The explosion sent a shockwave through the battlefield, shattering platforms and scattering debris. Vex landed smoothly, rolling into a crouch. He looked up, grinning. "That all you got?" The observation deck erupted into chaos. "Impossible," one of the officers shouted. Virex felt his composure slip. "They're adapting too quickly," another scientist whispered. "They're not just surviving the trials. They're evolving to match them." Virex clenched his claws. "Activate the advanced drones." A murmur spread through the room. "Sir, that's not protocol. The standard drones are all ready." "Do it. Now." The technician hesitated, then pressed a command into the control panel. The chamber rumbled. Phase 3. The kill protocol. The entire battlefield shifted. The drones retreated, vanishing into the darkness of the chamber. The floating platforms crumbled, forcing the humans into a small clearing of stable ground. Then, from the shadows, they arrived. Phase 3 combat units. These were not simple drones. These were war machines. Towering mechanical constructs emerged from the mist, their exoskeletal plating absorbing the ambient energy from the chamber. They stood nearly 3 times the height of a human, each one armed with multi-directional plasma cannons and advanced target tracking AI. One of the observers exhaled sharply. No species has ever reached Phase 3. Virex didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the 2 humans, watching, waiting for fear to set in. Surely, this was their limit. Surely, now, they would break. The war machines moved as one, their cannons charging with a high-pitched whine. A single shot could vaporize a fully armored warrior in an instant. Vex exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "All right, now we're talking." Rains simply adjusted her stance, ice cold and calculating. The first war machine fired. In a blur of motion, Vex and Rains moved. The plasma burst impacted the ground where they had stood, the explosion tearing through the battlefield with the force of a meteor impact. But they were already somewhere else. Virex's claws dug into the railing. They dodged a direct energy blast. Another scientist whispered, That should be impossible." It wasn't. Vex sprinted forward, weaving through the storm of plasma fire like a phantom, using the environment to slingshot himself closer to his target. He slid under a collapsing rock, then vaulted onto the war machine's leg, using its own armor as a foothold. With a roar of effort, he climbed. Rains, meanwhile, was already airborne. She launched herself off a crumbling ledge, twisting midair, and landing on the second war machine's cannon arm. Her hands gripped onto the plating as the weapon charged to fire. She ripped out the targeting module. The machine staggered, its systems thrown into chaos. The audience watched in horror. Virex's vision blurred. They aren't just surviving. They're winning. Vex reached the top of his war machine, grabbed onto an exposed wire, and ripped it free. The entire machine collapsed, crashing into the ground with a deafening boom. The chamber fell into silence. Then Vex dusted himself off and turned to the observation deck, grinning. What's next? Virex felt his blood run cold. The unbreakable ones. Silence gripped the observation deck. Not the stunned silence of awe. Not the contemplative hush of scientists analyzing data. This was the silence of fear. Dr. Virex's claws dug into the control panel, his mandibles twitching as he watched the chamber's monitors. He had seen countless species crumble beneath the Galactic Trials, but never had he witnessed anything like this. The humans were still standing. No, that wasn't right. They weren't just standing. They were thriving. The trial that refused to end. The chamber's war machines lay in ruins, their once impenetrable armor shredded, their advanced AI hacked, dismantled, or outright crushed by the humans' raw ingenuity and sheer aggression. The Phase 3 combat drones, the ones that had brought apex warriors to their knees, were now nothing more than wreckage beneath Vex's boots. And yet he was smiling. Not a tired, relieved smile. Not the kind of expression that suggested he had barely survived. No, he was grinning, as if he were just getting started. Beside him, Talia Rains exhaled through her nose, shaking dust from her hands as she inspected the battlefield. They were calm. Virex could hardly process what he was seeing. The Galactic Trials were designed to strip away ego, to remind every species that no matter how strong they thought they were, the galaxy was stronger. No species had ever completed Phase 3. No species had ever broken the test. Until now. A bead of sweat rolled down the brow of an officer standing beside Virex. "Sir," he muttered, we need to stop the test." Virex didn't respond. His mind was racing. This isn't possible. This shouldn't be happening. A deep, terrible thought whispered through his mind. What if the humans aren't the ones being tested? What if we are? The Council's intervention. The chamber lights flared red as the emergency failsafe activated. A voice rang out over the intercom. Not Virex. It was a member of the Galactic High Council. "Human representatives, you have exceeded all projected parameters for the Galactic Trials." The voice echoed, a mixture of awe and hesitation laced within it. "You have demonstrated capabilities beyond any known civilization." A pause. A hesitation. Virex knew why. This had never happened before. There was no protocol for what to do when the test failed. Finally, the voice continued. "We hereby declare the trial complete. You may exit the chamber." The command console flickered, and the doors at the far end of the chamber slid open, offering the humans a way out. Virex exhaled, gripping the railing. It was over. Thank the void, it was over. But then, Vex laughed. A low chuckle at first, then full-blown, genuine amusement. Rains turned toward him, brow slightly raised. Vex stretched his arms, rolled his shoulders, and grinned. "Yeah. No." Virex's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Excuse me." The council member's voice crackled. Vex turned his gaze toward the observation deck. "You don't get to start a fight, and then call it off just because you're losing," he said, stepping forward. Virex felt his stomach twist. The human wasn't looking for an escape. He was disappointed. He wanted more. Rains crossed her arms, nodding slightly. "I have to agree with him. You talked a big game about this being an ultimate test, but it turns out it's just a death trap with extra steps." A murmur ran through the observation deck. They refused to leave. One scientist whispered in disbelief. They wanted to continue. Another choked. Virex couldn't breathe. No one had ever asked for more. No one had ever challenged the council itself. The officer next to him spoke hesitantly. "Sir, the test chamber wasn't built with anything beyond Phase 3. The difficulty cannot be increased further." Virex's vision blurred. They had thrown everything at the humans. Gravity shifts, psychological warfare, combat drones. The machines designed to be unstoppable. And they were still here. They still wanted more. Vex grinned at the stunned silence. You built this place to break people, right? But you didn't account for one thing. The microphone buzzed. And what is that? Vex's expression shifted. A smile that no longer held amusement. A look of something terrifying. You built it for people who are afraid to die. Virex felt an icy shiver run down his spine. Vex stepped forward again, voice calm, but carrying an undeniable weight. You didn't account for people like us. He gestured to the battlefield around him. The wreckage. The destruction. You didn't account for what happens when someone walks into hell and laughs. Silence. A long, horrible silence. The council members on the other end of the intercom were arguing among themselves. End this now, one of them snapped. But what if? I said indeed. Virex hesitated. Then, finally, he pressed a button on the console. A loud metallic groan filled the chamber. The walls shuddered. The entire trial began collapsing. The final gambit. The chamber was tearing itself apart. Massive panels in the walls peeled away, revealing the underlying structure beneath, a web of powerful shockwave generators designed to implode the room in on itself. The ground beneath Vex and Reigns fractured violently, giving way to nothingness. The failsafe had been activated. The test wasn't ending. The council had chosen to erase it. They're trying to kill us, Reigns muttered. Vex just grinned. Finally, he said, cracking his knuckles. Virex stared in horror. They're still not afraid, he whispered. The humans moved, faster than before. Rocks collapsed around them. Plasma bursts erupted from hidden turrets in the walls. The entire structure was coming down. And yet, the humans were still laughing. The last thing Virex saw before the monitors cut to static was Vex leaping toward the collapsing walls, aiming for something even Virex couldn't comprehend. Something beyond the trial, beyond the test, beyond anything the galaxy had ever prepared for. Then the chamber exploded, and everything went dark.